good morning and welcome to the Boxing Day edition of Elevenses. I'm Kevin Williams of Survival Skills Rider Training, and this is Elevenses number 200 as it happens. Really astonishing that I managed to reach the number of 200. Let me first wish everybody a very Merry Christmas if you indeed celebrated Christmas. I hope you had a good one, and I hope you're looking forward to a pleasant day today. Got a fairly short show for you today, a little bit of news, nothing much going on. So what have we got to look at? Tesla are under investigation again for their touch screen, which allows drivers to play games on the move. The e-bike or e-scooter, I should say, scheme in the UK that allows these things to be hired out is to be extended. The Italian company that is trialling inductive charging under the road has just opened a test track. We'll have a quick look at that. We'll have a look at the registered blind rider who has apparently struggled to get insurance for somebody else to ride his bike. And finally, take a look at another unique helmet brake light. Before we've just got a quick video clip of a scooter owner taking his bike for a dip. So nothing too serious to go on today. As I say, hopefully everybody's had a good festive break and will be enjoying themselves later today. Clive and Kevin have looked in. Good morning to you both. Yeah, been a bit of a sort of a miserable day here today at the moment. It was fairly cold and chill yesterday. Nothing very exciting going on in the weather department. No snow down here in London, so not an official white Christmas at least. Some snow in other parts of the country, I understand, and we've had a lot of rain overnight, so I hope nobody's flooded out this morning. Anyway, to carry on, what have we got for you? Well, UK police are actually trialling Teslas at the moment as they switch towards electric vehicles, and some reports have suggested they're very happy with them. But right at this moment in the US, yet another investigation into Tesla has been launched. This time following a complaint from a user who discovered he could actually play games on the car's touchscreen whilst driving. Now, more than 500,000 Teslas produced since 2017 have been manufactured with touch screens, and the US National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, the NHTSA, is actually looking into this complaint. And the feature under scrutiny is called Passenger Play. And in theory, it allows the passenger to play games on the in-car touchscreen. Now, it appears that under the previous sort of software upgrade, the feature was only enabled when the vehicle was in park mode. But something was changed, and since December 2020, it's been possible to play games on the move. Now, the Tesla documentation, not surprisingly, says that this playing in motion feature is only for passengers, and so the person using it has to press some kind of confirmation button before the gameplay is allowed. The weakness of that is a sort of a lockout is fairly obvious, I would have thought. But even then, if the passenger is playing, the NHTSA has noted that the feature may distract the driver and increase the risk of a crash. Yes, which is why in the UK it's illegal to have a video running, as far as I know, on the screen when the car's been in motion. Tesla have not yet responded to the investigation. So don't forget, you are tuned to Elevenses. I'm Kevin Williams of Survival Skills Rider Training. If you've got a question, comment, any feedback, more than happy to look into that, and I'll try and do it as we go along. If I can't, I will get back to you at the end of the show. Right, so in Italy, a new inductive charging highway project has moved to a practical testing phase. Now, inductive charging, you're probably most familiar with this from smartphones. Basically, it's wireless, the wireless charging that you get with some of the higher end smartphones. You basically just place the phone on a charging unit, no wires are involved, and your phone charges by inductive charging. The system's fairly straightforward. Inductive charging has been known about for a very, very long time indeed. But the idea that it could be used for driving vehicles is obviously a relatively new one as we've moved towards a sort of an electric future. So in this case, the inductive charging loop would actually be placed in the road surface, and then the car or van or truck would run over it and would be wirelessly charged as it passed over the loop. And so an Italian automotive group, Stellantis, they've conducted what they're calling a dynamic wireless power transfer technology, and they have now laid this under a specially constructed closed circuit test track. Their Arena del Futuro, the Arena of the Future, is a 1,000-meter, just under over half a mile, of course, loop. And they're testing a Fiat 500 electric car and an Iveco E-Way bus on the road layout. Now, Stellantis is head of global e-mobility. One Annalisa Richards said, "This is a cutting-edge solution to provide a concrete answer to the issue of range and charging, both of which customers are concerned about." So charging vehicles, she says, while they are on the move, provides clear advantages in terms of charging times and the size of their batteries. And the company believes that they can successfully retrofit their technology to an existing roadway as well as building new roads with the technology built in. So yes, the immediate benefit would be the end of so-called range anxiety. But the question is, will it actually work, and is it practical? I mean, for starters, we're not being told here where they're considering placing this technology. One suggestion I have seen is that it's actually placed in car parks. So you can pop your car into a parking bay, and rather than having to plug it in at a sort of discrete meter, you would be charged simply by the inductive coil under the car, which would, of course, mean that all that needs to be dug up is a car park. Obviously, there are a lot of car parks, but having a car park out of action is considerably less disruptive than the problem of digging up a road. Now, when you think about what is actually under the average road, there is actually a patchwork of services underneath the tarmac already. It's one thing to lay this system on a brand new test track. I'm concerned about the idea of laying it onto existing roads. It's certainly very, very unlikely that you would ever consider laying this into every single road in the country, simply because of the vast network of roads, the cost involved, and as I say, this patchwork quilt of other services. There would also be problems every time you need to dig up the road to access another service. I mean, they just dug up the road around here again to put in super fast broadband. So that's hundreds of miles of road where holes have been dug, and each of those holes would presumably impact on the charging coils, unless there was a lot of sort of careful juggling of where the coils were versus where the access points to everything else is. So move on to the next stage of thinking, and what you begin to come to the conclusion is that in fact you'd actually only lay this kind of system over a limited number of roads, and ideally I would imagine that you'd be looking at something like the motorway system plus a limited number of the trunk A roads. But even so, if you're going to make this system of any practical use, you'd need to lay the system under a lot of roads very quickly indeed to actually produce a grid which is worth using. Because if a company is actually, considering the switching to inductively charged HGVs, they don't really want their lorry to run quite happily up 50 miles of the M1, for example, being inductively charged, but not actually having the charging system for the rest of its journey to Manchester or wherever. Actually, the M1 doesn't go to Manchester, does it? It goes to Leeds, but there we go. Anyway, navigation errors apart. The problems of just digging up the motorway system, I mean, I think it would cause considerable disruption if you think about the problems and the time it's taken to convert motorways to the so-called smart motorways, and you consider just digging up the inside lane to put in inductive charging. I think it would take a long time, and b if you try to do it all at once, the delays caused would be significant at least. I don't know how much weight and space inductive charging apparatus in the vehicle requires, but my guess is that it's likely to be restricted, at least initially, to heavy trucks and coaches. And I wonder whether it's actually worth bothering for private cars. There are also some efficiency concerns. The proponents claim that the efficiency of inductive charging is actually just a few percentage points down on wired charging. They're talking about something like a drop between about 96% and 94%. But if you're doing a lot of miles and you're paying a lot of money for the electricity to do those miles, a couple of percentage points begins to add up. And that's the best possible case. Two coils need to be aligned perfectly to get that maximum efficiency out of them. And for phones, that's quite possible because you get a charging dock with the phone, and so when you drop the phone in it, the phone is perfectly aligned with the coil, so you get maximum efficiency. But when they're not perfectly aligned, as with a generic induction charger, the charging efficiency actually drops right off, or it could fail completely. So it's really hard to see how you could get an independently steered vehicle actually in precisely the right place over the induction coils all the time. Um, and then finally, you're starting to build two competing networks, aren't you? We already have problems where there are chargers which aren't compatible with particular cars. Tesla spring to mind there. They have put their own system in. But now you have an inductive system which works for some vehicles, whereas other vehicles still need to be plugged in. So I'm doubtful about the whole technology. I know there are a lot of people very much in favor of it. I've got a friend who works in the transport research field, and he's very much in favor of inductive charging. I'm still skeptical about it. While we're doing the skeptical things, we'll talk about another transport technology which was brought into some glowing predictions, which has proven less rosy than initially suggested. I've just got a couple of comments there just to see what they have to say. Paul says it may be more feasible to install inductive charging to parking bays and lay-bys in the main highway. Yeah, I absolutely agree with you, Paul, there. I think that's possibly the way to do it, and that which case it's likely to target the short distance journeys rather than HGVs, unless you can get an HGV to carry a battery that's capable of taking a couple of 100 miles. And Paul also says, oh, that's the same comment twice. Right, okay. Nick's also looked in. Good morning, Nick. Right, okay. So, yes, micromobility and e-scooters. Yes, so the trials have been going some time now, and the word coming out of those trials is that they appear to be producing more questions than they have produced answers. Now, you're probably aware that mobility firms have spent an awful lot of money. It is quite said to be in the terms of tens of millions to get a foothold in what's termed the UK e-scooter rental market, for the very obvious reason that there is money to be made, with the rental charges being fairly spectacularly high, in fact. But there are widespread concerns now over their safety, and there are also now doubts over their green credentials too. Now, you'll probably also recall that as a result of the COVID pandemic, e-scooter trials were actually brought forward, with the first actually beginning in the middle of last year. These trials were expected to last for 12 months, but they are now being prolonged, and the latest date we have is late 2022, and that means legislation has also been put on hold. Now, the proponents of e-scooters and this sort of micro mobility idea generally argue that e-scooters are greener than cars, and that as a transport solution, what they do is they tackle the last mile problem. That's to allow you to get from home to a transport hub, or from the transport hub to work, allowing basically users to connect to trains and buses and to use public transport for the longer bits of their journey. In London, the busiest docks are apparently next to the tube stations, and Lime claims that this indicates that people are using them to link to another transport mode. But without actually any evidence presented in their statement, I mean, that seems to me to be pure speculation. Given that most of the docking stations for these scooters are next to tube stations, it's quite possible that people are actually riding them from transport hub to transport hub rather than taking a tube, and simply dropping them off there and then walking to work the last few hundred meters. So it's questionable how they're being used. Some studies suggest that, in fact, this is how they are being used, and that they're actually replacing journeys that people actually made by foot before, rather than rather than replacing journeys on private transport like cars. And that's not entirely surprising. If you think about what's going on in the world at the moment, people aren't particularly happy to use public transport. So anything that allows them to make the journey under their own steam in the open air, they are looking at. They also suggest that the people are using the e-scooters as a replacement for cycling as well. So there are questions over whether standing passively on a sort of an e-scooter is in fact producing any health benefits which you would get from walking or cycling, or so-called active transport. Leaked information from the official government data has been said to be not encouraging, and that they have determined that only a small fraction of e-scooter trips are actually replacing a car journey, and they are suggesting that many trips are actually made for fun. Perhaps as people just sort of going out to the local cafe or something when they otherwise wouldn't have bothered. Right now, anyway, the number of legal e-scooters on the roads is actually dwarfed by the number of illegal e-scooters, which is said to be around about 500,000 at the moment. You think of the population of the UK, which is about 66 million at the moment. That's a spectacular number of the population have actually got an e-scooter, and even more are expected to hit the roads after Christmas, despite the government actually producing guidance for retailers earlier this year, specifically aimed at restricting the illegal sales that they were expecting at this time of the year. MPs on the Transport Select Committee last year actually recommended the legalisation of all e-scooters, even the privately owned ones, as well as those on rental schemes. Partly, at least, I would imagine, because it would then be possible to bring in legislation about who uses them and to police it properly. But there are still significant safety concerns. Now, at least 9 people are known to have been killed in accidents involving e-scooters in 2021, and it said that those crashes all happened when people were using them illegally. I haven't got any data for legal e-scooter use and how many crashes there are. Presumably that's in the trial data but not being made public. NHS trauma specialists, this is rather interesting, have said they're treating more and more e-scooter riders with life-changing head injuries. And one London-based neurosurgeon was quoted in a paper report, The Guardian, as saying that the severity of e-scooter riders' injuries are more similar to those of motorcyclists and pedal cyclists. Now, I find that very hard to swallow, given that motorcyclists will be riding with an approved safety helmet. And cyclists and e-scooter riders don't currently need to wear helmets of any sort at all. If they do ride helmets, then they have to have a CE mark on them, but they are not built to the same standards as a motorcycle helmet. So even if you fall off a scooter, petrol-powered or electric-powered scooter at 20 miles an hour, and you fall off an e-scooter at the same kind of speed, it's hard to see how the e-scooter rider would have similar head damage. But there we go. He's a neurosurgeon, I'm not. Now, operators clearly are keen to stress the safety differences between the two scooters, and the Director of Public Policy at Lime, a chap called Alan Clark, points out the fact that their scooters have 2 independent brakes. They are stability tested. They have lights you can see for 300 meters away. And he goes on to claim that most people buying an illegal scooter will buy one with small wheels, one handbrake, and ones that are not fit to be used on roads or cycle lanes. Well, again, that is a place where if all e-scooters were legalized, then the legislation could kick in and enforce standards checks on the bikes that are being sold at the retailer. It would be far more difficult to get a dodgy e-scooter on the road. But aside from the safety issues, there are also environmental concerns. The batteries themselves are consuming significant amounts of lithium and cobalt, both elements which are in short supply and are needed for e-cars and e-buses and e-trucks. But the big difference is that unlike a car, which is likely to be used for many years, which has a battery with a fairly long life cycle, and usually with a battery which is recyclable itself, most modern e-cars are built with a battery which can be taken out and be replaced, thereby extending the life of the car, even if the battery's reached the end of its life. That's not the case with e-scooters, and it's likely that the entire e-scooter will be seen as disposable, and they're quite likely to end up in landfill. So it's said that they'll have a significantly worse impact on the environment, partly due to the high carbon costs of their construction in the first place and their short life, but also the problems of their disposal. So it increasingly does seem that there's skepticism that legal e-scooters can ameliorate congestion or public health. And maybe the answer is that you look at legalizing the entire system of using e-scooters and not restrict it to companies that want to make money out of it. Right, okay, so what other comments have we got? Martin says, happy Boxing Day. Thank you, Martin. Nick says, on the motorway near Frankfurt, he's seen overhead cables like for a trolley bus, which he says are mysterious. Well, maybe they are for a trolley bus. There are systems which still use overhead cables to power trams. Pantographs rather than the sort of the old hook over trolley bus line. Kevin says, induction on motorways for trucks, cars carried on trucks, motor rail style means diesel, petrol can travel cleanly too. Absolutely, but one can't help but think that you could drive to a railway station, drive yourself onto a rail train and arrive at your destination, probably with less congestion. I still think that many of the problems that we're attempting to solve with roads could be solved by going back to the railways. But hey ho, what do I know? I'm not a transport expert. Right, okay, so just a reminder that you are watching, if I can get the right thing up, Elevenses, and Elevenses goes out on Wednesdays and Sundays at 11. It's nearly always a live show, as today. Very occasionally I have to do a recorded one. You can catch up either on Facebook here, or you can head over to my YouTube channel where the show goes up live about an hour, or goes up recorded, I should say, about an hour after it's live. Right, okay, now on with the next story. Something that's appeared fairly widely in the press, and not just the motorcycle press, but wider afield in the ordinary press as well. It's about a former rider who tried to insure a bike so that other riders with appropriate ride other motorcycles insurance could take him out on his own machine. Now, this is a chap called Kevin Granger, 55, from Darlington. He's apparently been riding since his grandfather bought him an FS1E Yamaha, which you may recall. I certainly remember them well. Didn't learn to ride on one, but did blag my brothers for a few months when my own bike was off the road. But sadly, 2006, he noticed that his vision was deteriorating, and by 2011, he had to stop riding completely. And so for a number of years, he wasn't riding motorcycles at all. But then one day he blagged a ride with another rider on the passenger seat. And after doing that for a number of times, he decided that what he would do would be buy his own bike and insure it, so his friends could ride his machine and take him out. But he ran into some problems at this point. First of all, we found that dealers were actually reluctant to sell him a machine as he had no driving license. But having got hold of a Kawasaki GT1000, I think it said it was, his plans were brought to a complete standstill when he couldn't get any insurance either. Now, there's nothing in law that says somebody must have a license to own and insure a motor vehicle. But however, none of the big four price comparison websites would touch him. Eventually, he discovered the British Insurance Brokers Association, BIBA for short, which has a service to help people locate a broker if they are struggling to get insurance through the regular channels. And so within 24 hours, BIBA had put him in touch with A Plan, who finally sourced some insurance for him in March during the year. And now what that means is anybody with a license and a extension to their policy which gives them fully comprehensive cover on another bike can become a named rider on Kevin's policy and ride the bike with him on his back. He says he often goes out riding with his friend Jonathan Wells and says it lets him enjoy the riding and the social side of being a motorcycle rider. And he plans to do more riding in Europe and says he'd love to visit Colditz Castle in Germany. And he said, I want to show that disabled people shouldn't be treated differently to anybody else. I'm not special, nor is my insurance. My mobility is the same as everyone's. It's about time people started to view disabled people as people. Well, I kind of have to agree with him on that point. Right, okay, don't forget, if you do enjoy the show, do pop over to my coffee page. If you buy me a coffee over there, you do get access to all my writing from the Facebook archive for a month. At the moment, there are articles from 2014 all the way through to 2019 up. 2021 is also up, and the missing link 2020 I will tackle next year, and that'll be the complete set of Facebook articles. So do pop over there. There's plenty to read for free, even if you don't support me over there. I've just clicked on the wrong thing. There we go. Get rid of that. We don't want to see that all day. Right. Okay. So final sort of story of the day. You may remember when the first LED bicycle lights came out. They were fairly crude things, but they were a big step forward for cycle safety. They lasted a damn sight longer. I had some on my bicycle, and the big thing was that you'd go out for a ride and the light would still be flashing at the end of it, whereas with the conventional tungsten bulb, it would quite likely your batteries would go flat mid-ride. But it didn't take very long before somebody had the bright idea of sticking a LED light to the back of a headlight, back of a motorcycle helmet, and even that was soon surpassed by somebody else who combined one with a mercury switch. So basically what happened was every time that you decelerated, the mercury switch triggered the light to come on the back of your helmet. So you basically got a helmet brake light. But the odd thing is, despite those lights having first appeared 20 odd years ago, and with the obvious intent of being seen by drivers, they don't appear to have been spotted by the many inventors who keep asking for crowdfunding to foot the bill for their own new brake light development. And the latest to join the queue is a company called Third Eye Design. And they have created, let me show you a picture. There we go. There it is. What they're calling InView, which is a wireless helmet and brake and turn signal light, which they claim will help prevent rear end collisions. And you can see the rider there is squeezing the brake, and the helmet is also lit up. Okay, so system's been around a bit. Came out first in 2019. It was awarded a Best Safety Product prize as well. Predictably, it consists of 3 components. You get the helmet mounted unit. There's a unit which connects to the wiring of the bike, and then there's a little control box as well. You get all the connectors, everything you need, including batteries, to set the thing up. So far on so good. So what sets the InView apart from other manufacturers, according to a TED? Well, they say that it integrates with your motorcycle, so the signals all do the same thing at the same time. If you brake, the brake light lights up. If you turn, the appropriate turn signal lights up. And they say it's also smart enough to sense engine braking, and then it comes on when you decelerate. But I have to say, I am sure that I have heard that before. The original unit is apparently on sale, but they want crowdfunding for their next round of development. Being a skeptic, of course, as I am, my question immediately was, if the first round was so successful, whether they need find money from crowdfunding to fund the development of their next round. Anyway, what are the changes? Well, apparently all that they're going to do is make it slimmer, more robust, and give it optional replaceable batteries. Plus a crash detection system, which will be offered with a subscription service. So that looks to me to be the money maker. I suspect they haven't made any money by selling these to date, and it's the money maker service that they want to include, the subscription. But to suggest that this is actually innovative is stretching my credulity quite some distance. It didn't take me more than about 2 seconds on Google to find these. That one is the brake-free smart brake light. This one is the Cosmo, and that one is already on sale in the UK. You can find that one quite easily. And one more, that's the Smart Rider, which again is available via the internet. And the last one, I'm not sure I've got a photograph for the last one or not. No, it's not. That's that was from last week's show. There's another one that you can buy from AliExpress for $30. It's unnamed, but obviously is not going to set you back any great amount of money. Anyway, so forgive me for being a little bit skeptical about the motives of the company asking for some dosh to extend their brake lighting system. Okay, couple of other comments. Martin has said he'd no idea e-scooters were illegal in the UK. Yeah, we have a scheme which licenses certain hire companies to provide them, and they have a minimum specification which they have to meet. And they are legal for use on the roads and in cycle lanes, but not on footpaths. But the vast majority of the e-scooters are illegal to use, and they're quite like any vehicles used on the road. If you don't have a license and insurance, you can be hit with points and a fine, and people are finding that they're getting points and a fine for offences. They're also getting drink driving offences on these things, and some of them don't even have licenses. So when they do come to get a license, they will come preloaded with the offences, which is will be interesting to see how they deal with that. Something Paul has asked, which is an interesting question: why aren't the established helmet brands already offering these additional brake lights? Not a question pointing out these brands are in any way deficient, but simply seeking an answer. That's a very good question, actually. Why don't manufacturers put these things in their helmets? My big guess is that you would then compromise the safety of the helmet. Now, if you remember the story on the what is it, E2206 ECE regulation, which now applies to new helmets. It's moved up a notch from the old one, which was 2205, and now with the new standard, it's actually legal for the end user to attach anything to the helmet which is not an officially approved part. So intercoms, for example, so many of us hang on the sides of the helmet. I've got a little bracket which carries my bike-to-bike intercom, which I use for training, would be illegal. With a new helmet, the helmet cams that many people sort of stick onto the side or the top of their helmets will equally become illegal. All these components now have to be tested by the manufacturer to ensure that the helmet still meets all the impact absorption standards with those additional bits and pieces inside the helmet. So helmet manufacturers have for a while been integrating intercoms into helmets, obviously with a significant price premium over a bolt-on unit. And my guess is it's much the same. You'll need to either mount the things outside the shell, or you'll have to mount everything inside the shell, which takes away from the protection level of the helmet, although I presume there are areas that you can use which are very unlikely to be impacted. But yeah, my guess is that that is the answer. And Nick says Shark produce a helmet with LEDs. So there we go. I didn't know that. Be happy to see a picture of that sometime, Nick, or I might go and dig it out on YouTube. Right. Okay. So one more item today, just to leave us all with a slightly, I suppose, a bit of Schadenfreude, really, isn't it? If you're going to take your bike for a clean, this probably isn't the way that you intended to do it. I have to admit to having a good laugh when I saw that. It's the sort of thing we've all done. We've all lost our footing whilst wheeling a bike around, and probably most of us have dropped a machine as a result of that. The one that sticks out in my mind, actually, I was on a dispatch job, and it was a long distance one. It was fairly cold, wet, and I needed to stop for a pee, and so I found a bit of hedge, and lay by, off the main road, and there happened to be the car in front of where I'd parked the bike, a chap on the phone, and as I pulled up behind him and kicked the side stand down, I managed to get the webbing of the waterproof suit I was wearing caught in the side stand. So as I actually put my foot down, I actually moved the side stand back up again. So as I rolled the bike over sideways, the side stand just neatly rolled back up under the bike, and the bike toppled over, and I toppled over, and I landed sort of basically headfirst in a hawthorn hedge. So then I had the amusing sort of moments of actually trying to climb out from under my bike. It was the FZ 750, so I had to pick the heaviest one I owned at the time. Climbing out from under the bike, trying to disentangle myself from the stand and the hedge at the same time without making too many more holes in the suit. And all I could see as I sort of picked myself up was the driver's shoulders going up and down in the car in front, as he was obviously laughing his head off and telling whoever was on the phone to about the idiot who just crashed his motorcycle into the hedge behind him. So easy to do, and so I have a bit of sympathy with the rider as he ended up in the pool there, but I have to say it did give me a bit of a laugh at the same time. Okay, so Nick's given me the brand and name, so I will look up the Shark Squall. Good Lord, what a silly name. Right, okay, that is it for today. So thank you very much again, everybody, for looking in. Enjoy the rest of your festive break. We will have the 2001 show on Wednesday, and I'll use that one as a sort of a retrospective look back at the year. So again, thanks to everybody who's tuned in. Do pass on the word for these shows to your friends. Don't forget, there will be one of my webcasts which will look at filtering in just a few days' time. The date for that is he says, looking for the note I made earlier, Wednesday, 5th of January, 8 p.m. That one's going out live, and I'll be asking, do you need brains or balls to filter? And hopefully I'll use some of my filtering experience as a courier to give you my thinking on that. So that's it for another show. Stay safe out there. If you're going out riding today, be careful.